Welcome everybody for this presentation about the Odoo editor. In this talk, we're going to do a technical tour. We're going to have some technical knowledge about the Odoo editor, and we are going to create something, I hope, that is amazing. So first thing first, where is the Odoo editor? We can find it in a lot of applications. So it is in all HTML field. If I'm in a to-do application, if I'm in knowledge, we have like the underlying technology is using the Odoo editor. We also have it in the report editor. So if I'm going, for instance, here, the report, it is using the Odoo editor internally. So that's for that. And now we are going to see like the architecture of the editor. And we have two important classes. We have the Odoo editor and the WYSIWYG class that are very important. The WYSIWYG class is called by the HTML field. It is also called by the report editor. It is called by website forum. And in website, we have an extension that also calls the WYSIWYG. For mass mailing, we have an extension of the HTML field. And finally, for knowledge, we have an extension of the HTML field and an extension of the WYSIWYG. So I'll show you this graph so you can see that the WYSIWYG and Odoo editor are the most important class that you will need to investigate. And now, let's try to create an amazing dynamic widget inside the Odoo editor. What is a dynamic widget? Those widgets are the ones that you can find in knowledge, for instance. So if I want to have lists of, you see that there is like kind of an application within the editor itself. So if I come back to the to-do application, we are going to create this mathematical formula widget. So where we will be able to input our formula, and then we render it, and then we have some buttons to edit and save our widgets. So for that, we are going to live code. So I have prepared for you a module where I've already imported the library for rendering the mathematical formula. And I've also created some CSS, so you don't see me coding, wasting time coding some CSS. And now let's go right into our first patching of the WYSIWYG. This is how we are going to first create, add a command in the Power Box. So I will show you in a moment. There we go. So the first method we got override is get Power Box options. So I get the options. Gonna return it. And in those options, there is a property which is called commands, and I want to push into this array a new command. I'm gonna call it math formula, and we're gonna give it a description. There we go. So now if I go to my HTML field and I reload the page, if I launch this Power Box, the Power Box is what you see that contains all those commands. I can see that in the widget category, I have a new command which is called math formula. It doesn't have an icon yet, and it is in a widget category. So we want to make another category which is called, for this example, math. And for that, for the category first, going to call it math. And then for the icon, we have this property, font awesome, where we give it a font awesome class. And now, if I reload the page, type slash again, I see that we have our math formula with an icon in this category that is in the bottom of our Power Box. Now, what if I want the math category to be the first one? We can configure it in such a way. So categories, push, and we give it a name. We use the same name as the one we use here. And then we can configure it with some priority. And if it has the highest priority, it will be the first one in the Power Box. So now if I reload, tap slash, and there we go. We have our command being properly displayed the way we want. But what if I click on it? Nothing happens. Of course, because I haven't created the callback. So let's create the callback in the command. And what we want to do is, in the editor, we will use the native DOM API to do anything we want. So we are going to create an element, and we want to insert the element where the selection is currently. The way to do that is simply creating our element. Going to give it a class, and the class will be the one I've been styling in my CSS. So I will just copy paste this class. I'm going to give some text. And now we need to use, remember when I showed you the slide, we need to use the class OdooEditor that has been instantiated at some point in the WYSIWYG. So it is right now available. So this.OdooEditor, and it has a command that I will call with exec command, which is insert. And it can receive as an argument the DOM element, and right now it should be all fine. So let's try it. And there we go. Now we have our container, which is in the editor. And there is something by default. You can edit every element inside. And for our dynamic widget, we don't want it to be editable. We want to have it static so that we can click on it and we can create graphical user interface. And we don't want to edit it. Because it is using the native API, we could be tempted to use the attribute content editable. So let's try. Let's make it false. And if I reload the page, delete my widgets. Doesn't want to delete. I don't know why. Let's use the dev tool. There we go. And if I reload the page, add it again, now I can see that it is not editable. But there is a shortcoming. So if I'm going into the DOM and I inspect it, I can see that my attribute is properly added. I hope you can see it. Let's do like this. And but there is a problem. Is in the editor, whenever we save, there is a sanitization process that can happen in the client or that can happen in Python. In this case, if I reload the page, the content editable attribute will be removed by the JavaScript sanitization process. So if I come back, now it's editable again, and we don't want that. So we will not use the set attribute content editable, but rather we are going to use a special class, which is not editable. I do that. I remove my widgets, add it again. And now it is not editable. And if I reload the page, I come back here, and the element has been added again. And the reason is it's been deleted in the sanitization process, content editable false, but it's been added back. Anytime there is an element with the class O not editable, it will add automatically this attribute. So this is what we want. OK, perfect. But now that we have our container being prepared, we want to create our graphical user interface, our magnificent graphical user interface, I should say. Let's do this, this. And some div to render the output. So it's going to be there we go. Now I load the page, I delete my old widget, the new one, and we have it. Beautiful graphical user interface. And yeah, it's amazing. And but there is a problem with this, is that if I hit backspace here, I will show you that I'm not lying to you. So if I hit backspace here, there is a problem. The selection goes somewhere else. And there is other shortcomings that can happen because the editor has some bindings whenever we are trying to do anything in the editor. And we don't want to have our dynamic widget have some shortcut conflict or binding conflict, because there could be some customization, for instance, in knowledge or any other application. And we don't want to have like those random bugs happening. So we have a special class to be safe. It is called data OE protected. And this is not a class. This time it's an attribute. So set attribute. And it is data OE protected. There we go. Let's set to true. And now, if I reload the page, remove, I add it again, I type some letters inside it, delete, and now the binding doesn't conflict. So we always want to have data OE protected for dynamic widgets. And so starting to be better. Now we want to make our widgets starting to be dynamic. And for that, we could use OWL, and we could instantiate an OWL application in those widgets. Actually, this is the way Knowledge is doing this work, is that initializing OWL. But for sake of simplicity for this talk, we are just using the old paradigm, and we are going to create a class to make our widget. But feel free to use any technology you want. So I'm creating my class. Yes, like this. It's going to take the element, which is our container, and let's cut and paste those lines. And we are going to do our binding. So let's get the text area. Let's get this one. Ah, no, it's like this. There we go. And now we are just going to bind whenever anything happens in the text area. And this dinner with an input. I'm writing too fast. There we go. And now what we want is to use the library that I told you I've been importing before, and it's called catex.render. And the first thing it takes is the text area is a value, so the text area value in our case. We're going to take an element for output, And then this one also requires an option that we don't really care, but so it's throw on error, because by default is creating traceback, and we prefer not having traceback, so let's set it to false. And now if I reload the page, delete our previous widgets, add our formula, it doesn't work, of course, because I haven't initialized my widget. So let's initialize it, just like so. And now reload again, add my formula, and now magic happens. We have our widget that is starting to work. And yeah, it's pretty cute. So now what we want to do is, so as always, reload the page, and there is something happening. As I told you before, there is this sanitization process that is doing random things. So it's removing our text area, it has removed our square root icon, and now we are left with just this garbage. So what we want is to, whenever we want to save a dynamic widget, it could be better just to save the minimum of the interface, because we don't care to save in the HTML all the graphical interface. So actually we want to get rid of everything rather than just some of the things. To do that is pretty easy. We just set an attribute on the container, and it is transient content. So we do that, we reload it, add it again, adding my formula, reload, and now we have it. It's clean. We don't save those contents. That's great. But then when we open our editor again, we want to have our widget being initialized. So how to do that? We need for that to override another method which is important, which is start edition. This is an async method. So let's make it async. And I'm going to call the super like so. We're going to await it. There we go. Now, what you want to do is, whenever the editor is starting, we want to get all the math formula container that are within the page, and we want to initialize our widgets. And for that, we need the root. We need to use the root element of our editor to query selector all. For that, our root of our editor is OdooEditor editable, which is accessible with this property. Editable. So from here, I can query selector all our container. Let me copy paste, because I love copy pasting. Whoops. Perfect. Now, the only thing I need to do is to initialize my widgets. And whenever I reload the page, there we go. It's coming back to life. So pretty good. But what happened, of course, when I add some data inside my widget and I reload the page? Yeah, well, it's gone now. So we need to find a way to save it somewhere. And where are we going to do this? Well, we are simply using the DOM. We are going to save this inside an attribute of our container. So let's go back to our binding here, and let's just do that. We can call it whatever you want with data prefixed. So let's call it formula value. That's pretty good. And then I will just pass the text area value, and there we go. Load the page, adding back my formula, And then, as you see, if I'm going into the console, I see that my attribute has been properly set. Reload the page. My attribute is still there, but not yet rendered. So what we want to do is to update our widget to just render it whenever we initialize it. So let's do that like so. Value equals so we have a value now, and because we are going to render it twice, let's make a method to help us not copy-paste those lines, even though I love copy-pasting sometimes. It's best to create a method. So this.update here to replace the call. And we are not going to use the text area value anymore. We are going to use the value, but we need to set it just right here. There we go. And now we need, whenever we construct our widget, to directly update it with the value that has been get through the attribute. Perfect. Let's hope, cross the finger. It is working for our output pretty good, but we also want to update the text area. So just simply copy pasting, as you know, I love it. There we go. Even better. Now we have succeeded to save it. It's not finished, huh? There is other things. Let me tell you now. There's another thing that you might want to use when you use the editor, which is new in 17, is that you are able to drag and drop some content. But by default, you cannot do this with the container. But it's pretty easy, actually. You just have to add a new class, which is OE movable. And then it can become movable. But I need to add it back to that. So let's add it again. Oh, what happened? Yes, small glitch in the matrix. It's just the library that doesn't like null value, so I'm just gonna solve this quickly. It's not really important. And now, if I add back my formula, I can move this dynamic widget, and that's pretty good. Okay. Next thing we need to consider, because we are working with an editor and our users sometimes they make errors and they want to undo their changes. And for that, there is the editor history. Not to confuse with the new history feature in knowledge, where it's just a history of the document. Here we are talking about whenever we do any kind of edition, we want to undo and redo our changes. Like if I add a couple of letters, I undo those changes. And by default, if I'm changing my widget, and which will change the attributes, if I do backspace, it's not going to change anything in my widget. So for that, we need to learn about a new method of the Odoo editor, which is history step. So I'm going, whenever we input something, we are changing the attribute, but we want to create a step so that there is a change in the DOM that is being listened by the editor. And this change, all the change that has been made in the DOM, we want to say history step now, so that it takes all those changes and they will be reverted if we do undo. So let's do this with the OdooEditor instance, but it's in our widget not accessible, so we need to pass it somehow. So let's just do that. So whenever we initialize the widget, we're just going to pass the reference, this.OdooEditor. We need to do it in here as well. Now I have the instance, and I can just call history step. There we go. Reload the page, and now each time I'm changing a letter, we have the the attribute that has been changed. And if I undo the change, nothing happened yet in our widget. But we have the change that has been properly changed in our attribute. If you don't see it, you just have to believe me. OK, fine. So whatever we want to do is, whenever we do a step in the editor, we want to always update our dynamic widget. And a step can happen whenever we call it directly, like we do here. But it also happens anytime we type a letter, or anytime we undo also. If we added a widget, we undo it, we redo it, it's a step. So if we can hook ourselves in this history step, we can just update our widget whenever we make a step. So we are just going to do this in the start edition method, because in start edition, this is where we are initializing the Odoo editor. So when it's finished, we want to patch our Odoo editor. Let's just do that. And as I said, history step method. And we call this super. And now we are just going to retrieve all the elements, and we are going to update the widget. But first, we need to store those widgets somewhere, because we don't really store them right now. And I'm just going to be dirty, sorry. I'm creating a global variable, but feel free to be a cleaner. So let's create our widgets. New weak map. We need to create a weak map. And anytime we create a widget, we're going to store it. So right now we are creating here, set with element. And let's do that also here. There we go. So now that we have stored our widget, whenever we do a step, we are just going to query selector. I'm going to copy paste this line actually. There we go. And because we are in the Odoo editor, we need to change this reference to this, because this is the Odoo editor. And I'm going to retrieve my widget. Widget equals widgets.get. And then we provide the elements, and now we have our widget. So we're just going to update its value first. Equals element get attribute. And what is the name again? This one. And then we just need to update our widget. And there we go. Now, each time we make a step, it should re-render our component. So let's try it a couple of times. Control Z, and it is working. So now we've nailed down the history. It's done. Pretty good. Pretty good. But let's add another kind of paradigm in our widget, where we want to add a button to edit and save our widget, so that we only make one step. We don't have like one step for each keys, which can be relevant in some kind of dynamic widget where you don't want to save each time something happens, but only bundle some changes together. So to do that, I'm creating a button in my graphical user interface, just like so, using Bootstrap to help us. Outline secondary, so it's more cute. And then we're gonna just retrieve the button, just like so. Then we want to have a state in our widget, which we will call edition. And by default, it is not edition. By default is just rendering. So we're gonna bind our button. Just copy paste it. There we go. When we click on it, we are just going to toggle the state of our widget. And we want to update our widget again. This.update. There we go. And now here, just some bit of logic. If it's not in edition, we're gonna set the state, the label of our button, text content to be, I translated, edit. We're gonna have our text area that we want to hide. So let's do this using bootstrap dnone. And there we go. One more time. Then we're gonna have the button to save it. Gonna remove the dnone if it's in edition mode. There we go. Reload the page, and my button is here, and I can edit it. Ah, I made a typo. I'm sure you all saw it. Whatever. So now I have my button. I can save it, but I need to bind my history step only when I save it. So we're gonna do this in the button. So when we change the state and it becomes not editable again, we're gonna consider that we close and save. And I'm just cutting and pasting those lines. I reload the page, edit, delete those, save, and if I undo and redo, it's only using one step. So it is interesting. Okay. So our widget is soon finished. We need to handle other things now. When we copy and paste our content, we have a traceback. And this is not directly related to the editor, but we need to fix it first for the next demonstration. So for that, what happens actually here is whenever we copy paste it, we make an history step, and then we try to get a widget from our weak map, but it has never been created, so it is undefined. So we are just going to create it if it doesn't exist yet. So let's make a function. It's going to take the same argument as the creation of a new widget. So element and OdooEditor. Going to retrieve the widget just like so. Let's make it a let. And let's create our widget if it doesn't exist. Let me copy paste this line. Actually, I don't need to copy paste it, but whatever. There we go. We add it into the map. And we're gonna return it. There we go. And so now, when we retrieve our widget, if it's not created, we're creating it. And now we will have copy pasting working. Yes. Perfect. We have a beautiful widget. This is amazing. But now has come the time where people want to collaborate together. So we're going to simulate a collaboration situation by just doing this. We have a new tab. And what happened when I focus on the element, it is not working anymore. And the reason is history step is not called yet. You would see that if I type a letter now, because history step will be called, the function will be called again, and we will have it. So we need to bind one last function. When we are in collaboration, we have on external history steps. And here, we paste those. There we go. I could make a function to not have to duplicate the lines, but just for the sake of simplicity, I would just copy paste those lines, the same as history step. And now, when we are in collaboration situation, so let me reload the page. I am here, new widgets, new tab, and it is not working. It is not working because I have probably miswritten those. But don't worry, because I have backup situation for those live presentation. Did I type it right? It should work. But actually, it's the end of our live coding session. And if I copy paste all those lines, it's pretty much everything I did right now. And I reload the page. Let's try again, cross the finger. It is not working. But it always worked. But of course, because we are presenting today, it is not working. But I can tell you it's working. Please believe me. That being said, thank you very much for your attention. I'm very glad you were here. And now it's time for questions, if you have some. So we have the link here, and I will just watch the question in my tab. So first question: how could we use render the content of a template into the HTML content of a formula widget? I'm not sure to understand the question. Yes, I mean, yes. So the question is, how do you render this widget? And you can use any technology you want, like React if you want it, all whatever you want. So you can have the template, if I understood properly, be anywhere, and you just use JavaScript to render it, handle the logic. Here I give an example with a simple widget, but you can use any technology you want. So is that the question? Thank you. A better solution for storing the widget. You can store it on the same class if it has like in the WYSIWYG override, or you can use a service. I mean, there's many ways. I think a good way to do this, if you have like a name that you know is not gonna clash with another name for your plugin. For instance, if I were here, I could have created this map in the WYSIWYG instance. So I would have just created it somewhere in WYSIWYG in the initialization. This dot formula widget equals somewhere. And seems to be the only questions. So I hope you liked it.